Welcome to the Spiritual Dance Podcast, a virtual space for creative souls discovering how to move in sync with the rhythm of spirit. I'm your host, Carla White Crow, also known as the Dancing Oracle. In this podcast, I share openly about my journey of weaving together my two primary passions, spirituality and dance. My intention is to encourage and inspire spiritual seekers in pursuit of a more embodied form of spirituality, as well as provide insight and tools for those seeking to expand their creative edges in service to the world of spirit. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to quickly let you know that if you are someone who is interested in the topics I cover in this podcast, which are astrology, divination, magic, psychic development, embodiment, and of course, spiritual dance and movement practices, then I invite you to check out my book, Dance Divination, Movement That Illuminates the Mysteries of Spirit, as that is where I dive into all those topics more thoroughly. You can find the paperback and Kindle versions on Amazon, or learn more about my book through the book page on my website. I'm also planning to record an audio version at some point this year, so make sure you're subscribed to my newsletter so that you're notified when that is available. And as always, links to all these things will be included in the show notes. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Spiritual Dance Podcast, Season 2. Initially, I had planned to launch Season 2 in February, but the topic for Episode 11 has been stirring in me so intensely that I decided to just go ahead and let it come forth. I also have a special announcement to share about a new online community I'm starting this month, so be sure to stick around until the end to hear all about that. All right, let's get into today's topic, which is all about learning how to work with the lunar cycle by dancing with the 4 main phases of the moon. My relationship with the moon is deeply personal. For as long as I can remember, I've always looked for her in the sky. She's been this ever-present beacon of hope for me. But in 2019, I began nurturing a deeper connection with her. If you've been following me for a while, then you know that around 2019, I went through a pretty dramatic and devastating exit from Christianity. I'm not going to talk about that in this episode, but if you want to hear that story, then go back and listen to episode 3 titled Losing My Religion. Let's just say that in 2019, my entire world as I knew it collapsed, and I was in a pretty dark place. I had no idea what my spiritual path or my life in general would look like moving forward. But in the midst of the darkest moment of my life, there was one voice calling to me. That voice was the moon. I could feel her inviting me into a new season, and so I began to be more intentional about looking for her in the sky each night, and even in the day. I don't know about you, but for me, there's something extra special about seeing her in the daytime. It feels a little sassy, like she's saying, I'll show up whenever I want to. I mean, have you ever seen the sun at night? Anyways, as I nurtured my relationship with the moon, I began to feel held and supported. She illuminated my path forward during one of the darkest seasons of my life, a time where it felt like everything I knew had faded to black, but I just knew I could count on her to show up each night. Even when I couldn't see her, I could feel her, and there was something so beautiful and so reassuring about her presence. I could feel her gently nudging me to keep going, to keep searching for something pure, something new. So I began to read books about the moon. I learned about the lunar cycle and each of her phases. I started attending a moon-focused yoga class and moon circles with other women. On full moons, I would place my ever-growing crystal collection outside to absorb the fullness of her radiance. And then I started making moon water, which I still do today. Eventually, I found myself wanting to understand more about the zodiac signs, which, of course, led to an obsession with astrology. In those first few years, I would play a game with myself of guessing what sign the moon was in just by tuning into how my body felt as I connected with her. And that was where my journey of working with cosmic energy in my dance and movement practices began. So, for those of you who are new to this topic, I want to share about the different phases of the lunar cycle. From an astronomical perspective, there are 8 phases of the moon, but I actually recognize 9 phases. Let me explain. The 4 main phases that most people who work with the moon recognize are the new moon, the first quarter moon or the waxing moon, the full moon, which is the second quarter moon, and lastly, the third quarter moon or the waning moon. These are the phases I work with each month in my practice. The other 4 phases happen in between the 4 main phases. Those are the waxing crescent moon, which is between the new moon and the first quarter moon, the gibbous moon, which is between the first quarter moon and the full moon, the disseminating moon, which is between the full moon and the third quarter moon, and lastly, the balsamic moon, which is between the third quarter moon and the new moon. So that gives us 8 different moon phases. However, I also recognize what's called the dark moon, which is the day leading up to the rebirth of the new moon. It's a great time for shedding anything that needs to go and preparing for a new cycle. And that is why I say I recognize 9 different moon phases. Working with the cycles of the moon and engaging with lunar energy on a regular basis can help you grow, evolve, birth your dreams into this world, and find fulfillment in your life's journey. Over the last couple of years, I've constructed my own steady rhythm of activities that I utilize each month to align myself with the moon's energy. And I'm going to share that process with you so you can benefit from it as well. Obviously, my approach to working with the moon is going to incorporate spiritual dance and movement practices. And as always, I want to remind you that you don't need any dance training or experience to do this, just a willingness to explore something new in your body. So typically I work with the 4 main phases each month because it kind of gives me an anchor point or a weekly focus that I can attune my energy to. I've given my own title or theme to each of those 4 main phases as it relates to my dance and movement practices. Those are week 1, the new moon phase, embody. Week 2, the first quarter moon phase, create. Week 3, full moon phase, express. Week 4, third quarter moon phase, reflect. I try and set aside approximately 30 minutes once a week to connect with each lunar phase. Ideally, you would want to choose the day of, the day before, or the day after each phase so that you can connect with the energy present in the sky. It's helpful if you can prepare an area in your space and gather any supplies ahead of time. I share a lot of practical tips for this process in my free PDF guide on starting a spiritual dance practice, which you can access by joining my mailing list or by messaging me if you're already a part of that. But essentially, you want to have a space that is free of distractions, safe for you to move around in, and that has everything you need so your flow isn't interrupted. It's also really helpful to have something you can record yourself with, such as your phone and a tripod if possible. Rewatching your movement makes it easier to discern the information or messages being communicated by your physical body, especially if you're engaging in a channeled movement practice. If you did not have recording equipment available, then do your best to journal everything you experience right away. Now let's break down each of the 4 main phases and how to work with them. The lunar cycle begins with the birth of a new moon. My key word for this phase is embody. This is where we hold space for something new to rise up or drop in to our awareness. And as a dancer, I allow this energy to inhabit my physical being. This is a time to connect with our imagination and envision what it is we long to send out into the world around us. That can be a personal goal, a professional goal, or maybe a project or a service-oriented goal. During the new moon, we move with possibility and dream about the energy our soul wants to engage with in this cycle. I do this by working with my channeled movement practice. Sometimes I channel the wisdom of my physical body, which is a form of somatic dance. And sometimes I channel information from the world of spirit. As I hold space for myself in this moment, I follow my intuition about where I should place my focus. If you're unfamiliar with the term channeled movement, I'll link one of my blog articles in the show notes. I also discuss this practice in episode 7 of this podcast and give a thorough breakdown in my book on dance divination. If channeling is not your thing, or if that approach is not specific enough for you, there are many other approaches you could take for working with the new moon. You could focus on the element, zodiac sign, or ruling planet of the new moon. You could also work with another form of divination, such as tarot, oracle, or runes, to determine a theme you can focus on for this new cycle. For example, at the time of recording this, our next new moon is in the sign of Aquarius. So I could focus on the energetic qualities of Aquarius, the element of air, as Aquarius is an air sign, or the planets Saturn, the traditional ruler of Aquarius, and or Uranus, which is the modern ruler of Aquarius. I do this in addition to channeling, but if you're just starting out, I would pick one area of focus. If you decide to work with the element, zodiac sign, or ruling planet, there are sections of my book you can reference that provide a lot of detail and suggestions for working with these things using dance and movement practices. So my process for week 1 of the lunar cycle looks like meditating on the element, sign, and ruling planet of the new moon, as well as spending approximately 10 minutes listening to spirit and or my body through channeled movement. Then I journal all the things that come into my awareness through those activities and start to narrow down what I want to focus on over the coming month. Initially, there are usually 2 to 3 different goals I've identified, but in the days that follow, I try to pick just one that really stands out for me. And that takes us into week 2. Week 2 of the lunar cycle is where we move into creating structure that will support the dreams, goals, or desires we've identified for ourselves. It is a time to design and build a container that can hold our vision. As a dancer, I use this phase to create a movement sequence that I can practice and meditate with to help align my whole being with the energy I long to see manifested in my life. This is often a time where I work with a practice called cosmic choreography. Essentially, that means creating a movement sequence that helps you to move with the energy of the cosmos. And again, I have a whole podcast episode, blog articles, and an entire section of my book dedicated to explaining that process. So go ahead and check that out. During the first quarter moon, I put together shapes, postures, and movements that match the way I want to feel or that match the energy I want to harness. I try to shoot for at least 4 sets of 8 for this movement sequence, meaning you count to 8 4 times. Once you have your sequence, you'll want to repeat it over and over to really experience the energy of it. Remember to video record your movements so you don't forget it. Alternatively, you can write down the moves in as much detail as you'd like. You may also want to try and select a piece of music to accompany you, one that matches the vibration of your movement. In the days that follow, I would encourage you to continue to practice your movement repeatedly. Think of it like a movement meditation. Every time you perform your sequence, you're activating that energy both in and around you. This acts like a magnet, drawing the very thing you want towards you. Allow this energy to grow and expand as you approach week 3. The full moon phase is where we experience the peak of the moon's light. Likewise, we are also experiencing the height of the energy available to us in this lunar cycle. By the time the full moon arrives, you should feel really comfortable performing your movement in its fullest expression. You may even find yourself longing to dance outside under the night sky. Week 3 of the lunar cycle is considered to be the most social time of the month, making it an ideal time to share your movement with others. Take advantage of the bold energy available to you in this phase and perform your sequence for a group of friends or perhaps even online. You can also think of the full moon as an opportunity to release your work into the universe, trusting Spirit to bring it to completion. Set aside time to intentionally share your movement with something or someone else. Let it exist outside of you. Perform your sequence at least 3 times in a row or to an entire musical track. However you decide to express your movement, be sure to record it, as you'll use that in the last phase of the cycle. Additionally, don't be surprised if your sequence becomes a launching pad that leads you into a more free and spontaneous flow of movement. Repeating a movement continuously is a little bit like turning on a faucet. Let yourself be saturated in that energy. Gift yourself the space to experience the overflow and celebrate the abundance of this moment. Remember to practice gratitude and honor your investment in creating and growing something new. And as a side note, I would encourage you to pay close attention to your emotions around the full moon, as they tend to be louder during this phase. Remember that your emotions are messengers and they need space and often permission to let themselves be known. This is the perfect time to facilitate emotional release for yourself. If you need help expressing your feelings, find a music track that matches your emotions and allow yourself the freedom to move them through your body. Don't be afraid to express any emotions that some perceive as negative. Things like sadness and anger need to be given a voice before they can dissipate. The 4th week of the lunar cycle begins with our 3rd quarter moon. This is a time where our energy starts to wane and we can rest, recuperate, and reflect on what we've accomplished. In my practice, I use this time to review and or rewatch the movement that came forth in this cycle, which is why it's so helpful to use a recording device. This is where I really dive into my dance divination process, which is the observation and interpretation of any messages that were communicated to me through the movement sequence I created and expressed, as well as any spontaneous movement that flowed afterwards. As you watch your movement back, write down anything you see, feel, notice, or receive through your psychic senses. Reflect on the shapes, tempo, dynamics, and qualities being expressed. Ask yourself, what direction is my energy flowing as I move? You'll likely notice things you may want to do differently in the next cycle. Just try not to be overly critical of yourself. This is a learning process. Let your movement be a teacher. And if you recorded any spontaneous movement, watch that in the same manner. Observing what you created and expressed in your physical body will provide valuable information you can use to take inspired action in the next lunar cycle. At the end of week 4, during the dark moon, it will be time to lay your work to rest. You may want to create a simple ritual for this moment. You could light a candle and call on whatever spiritual connection is meaningful to you, and then speak a few words of gratitude for what you've gained from this cycle. Finally, let go of anything you'd rather not carry into the next one. This allows space for new energy to emerge. And on the next new moon, you can start all over again by setting a new intention. So that is how I work with the moon on a weekly and monthly basis. And I share this with you as an invitation. Feel free to adapt this process to your own needs. And full transparency, life happens. I try to show up for this process as I am able to. Sometimes I miss a week, sometimes I miss a month, or 2, or 5. But I know that the moon is always there for me, waiting and ready when I return. I also want to name the fact that working with the cycles and rhythms of the natural world is a privilege that not everyone has time or space for. The demands of life are often more than we can handle, so give yourself grace if that is where you're at. My practice started with simply noticing the moon in the sky whenever I was able to. Maybe you take a tiny portion of this offering and implement that for now. That can be enough. I fully believe Spirit will meet you where you're at and work with whatever you can bring to the table. Okay, so now I'm going to share my announcement with you. In 2024, I really pulled back from social media, mostly because I needed time and space to complete my book, but also because I was tired of producing content that nobody saw. Despite my efforts to keep up with the algorithm changes, my account growth had pretty much flatlined. So I started working with Pinterest. I really enjoyed creating for that platform because by simply doing the thing I love, which is sharing educational content about spiritual dance, I was able to reach an entirely new audience of people who were truly interested in learning about my work. My website traffic saw exponential growth, and my mailing list more than tripled in size. As I began connecting with people all over the world, I longed for a place to build community with those who were interested in the same things that I was, but without the noise and privacy issues that come with social media. So this month, I'm launching my own online space called Lunar Rhythms Dance Community. This was inspired by this episode's content because I really wanted a space where people could put this process of dancing with the phases of the moon into practice. I'm the type that needs accountability in order to implement something new and stick to it. I really believe in the transformational power this process holds, and I want to be able to provide you with the resources to make the most of it. You can join the Lunar Rhythms dance community through the Patreon platform. There are 3 tiers with different levels of content. The Blue Moon tier provides weekly content designed to support and inspire you as you embody the themes of each monthly lunar cycle. Week 1 contains a recorded video class on the element, zodiac sign, and ruling planet of the new moon. I also offer guidance for holding space for yourself to witness the dreams, visions, and goals that are longing to rise to the surface. At the beginning of week 2, you'll receive written instructions and worksheets that will help you to craft your own movement sequence so you can embody the energy you long to attract. Week 3, you'll be invited to a live online gathering to celebrate the full moon with a collective movement meditation, and also have an opportunity to be witnessed in sharing the movement sequence you crafted, if you want. And in week 4, you'll be guided through the dance divination process through written instructions and worksheets that will help you gain deeper meaning and insight about the movement you've worked with during the lunar cycle. The Dark Moon tier includes everything in the Blue Moon tier, plus 2 additional pre-recorded movement meditations offered during the spring and autumn equinox. A 1-hour group live online session where I offer oracle card pulls for the dark moon phase, in addition to a PDF with journal prompts, and exclusive posts where you can ask questions about your specific moon placement, lunar transits, nodal shifts, and eclipse themes that are relevant to your natal astrology chart. The supermoon tier includes everything in the blue moon and dark moon tiers, plus 2 additional live movement circles offered during the summer and winter solstices, where you will be guided through cosmic choreography and a collective channeled movement transmission to help you make the most of these important energetic shifts. You'll also receive 2 annual one-on-one video coaching calls where I provide personalized, lunar-based advice on topics such as embodying your natal moon sign, aligning with your lunar nodes, understanding your progressed moon, and making the most of the annual eclipse cycles. And I will also have a free tier where I will share announcements and educational posts, much in the same way I use social media, but without the risk of getting lost in that abyss. You can join my online community through the link in my show notes, my website, the link in bio in any of my social profiles, or by searching for The Dancing Oracle on Patreon. I'm currently populating that platform with some foundational content. Content for the Lunar Rhythms tiers will begin on Monday, January 27th, 2025, just before the Aquarius new moon. And that brings us to the end of our episode for this month. I hope to see you all online soon. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would greatly appreciate a positive rating and review. This helps others find me so I can support and inspire as many humans as possible. If you would like to learn more about my work, please visit www.thedancingoracle.com. There you can book an intuitive reading or embodied coaching session and find out about my upcoming events. You can also join my Lunar Rhythms community on Patreon and sign up for my mailing list to be notified of my upcoming course on the topic of dance divination. Until next time, be well, friends, and I will catch you in the next episode.